Yeah, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this new beginning. We are from Beginning Experience, and it's a ministry that supports people who lost a spouse, either through death, divorce, or separation, right? And we help them work through their griefs to be healed and transform their lives to be free again in order to love themselves, others, as well as God, right? Now, let me explain what grief is. Grief is a normal experience that all human beings go through. And we have all kinds of loss. Maybe a loss of a career, a loss of health, right? And a loss of family members, right? And each of us at beginning experience here, right, have experienced the loss of a significant others, a relationship, someone that we love deeply, right? So grief is very private and it's very unique for each one of us. So it takes time to come through the grief, right? It varies from situation to situation and from person to person. Now, when grief is not resolved, it is very destructive. When we're in the crutch of grief, we may experience anger, sadness, guilt, and even behave with this emotion in an uncharacteristic way. Grief is painful, even exhausting. When grief is not acknowledged, when it's buried, when we deny it, and when we try to stuff it, it causes inner deafness. That means we die internally to our spirit, and mental anxiety, and can take a toll on our health and even physical illness. Discovering and identifying this pain leads us to the peace of mind and allow you to continue life journey and discover your authentic self. Resolve grief, resurrect the spirit inside you, and it's life-giving. Through the experience, though the experience is different of each of us, there are some common factors. And Elizabeth, my pronunciation is not so good because of dyslexic, Kubler-Ross, identified these common factors as stages of grief. Now, in her book that she published on death and dying, she states that there are 5 stages of grief. Sorry, I forgot to do this. Right. So there are 5 stages of grief. The first stage is denial, characterized by a feeling of numbness. When numbness subsides, denial may serve as a buffer, a temporary defense against the reality of the situation. The person may sometimes this can't be happening to me, right? So a person feels like, no, this cannot be happening to me. Am I in a dream? Unconsciously or consciously looking for the former spouse in familiar places, pretending maybe the spouse is overseas, on assignment. Another stage of grief is anger. The anger stage is characterized by feeling of rage, wanting to strike out at God, or the former spouse, or the church, or people who don't understand, or even oneself, and having contributed in some way, one or another, to the loss. We may ask questions like, why me? How could this be happening to me? Why is she or he leaving me to take care of all the responsibility? And wanting to fight back and get even with God, even with people around us, our children, our family members, our former spouse, or even at ourselves. Another stage of grief is bargaining. Bargaining is an attempt to fix things, to plead with the former spouse or make a bargain with God, to take it all away, attempting to make a deal with God. If only you could make it him or her well again. I will go to church more often, telling the former spouse, I will do this if you come back. Please, if you come back, wishing the former spouse would come back. Another stage is depression. If the reality of the loss is too heavy to accept, the person in this stage may feel helpless, low, wandering, and in extreme could feel suicidal. Feeling of hopelessness, frustration, bitterness, and self-pity, facing the loss of hope, dreams, and plans for the future. Feeling a lack of control in the situation, believing nothing could do to change things, feeling that if everything in life is all falling apart. The last stage of grief is acceptance. Acceptance comes when the reality of the loss is dealt with and accepted. The person feels peaceful and hopeful. A new beginning is experienced. Difference between resignation and acceptance, realizing that each partner has some responsibility for the problems in the marriage. Seeing that some good has come out of this pain of loss. Goal turns towards personal growth. There's no order in which we experience these stages, and they are not timed or predictable. You may jump here and there, go back and forth, experiencing more of this at once. But when we go through grief, we are not ourselves, right? Basically, behaving and reacting from grief, we don't behave as we usually do, nor as the person we grow to become. When we become stuck in one of the stages and never move through the rest of the grief process, failing to face our feeling over the loss and trust, failing to fully recover from it, we call this the death of our spirit. Pain will not go away faster if we ignore it or bury it. You may find that it erupts in unexpected way at unexpected time. You may become stuck in your grief and experience a sense of death inside you. This is death of the spirit. However, if you allow yourself to move through all the stages of grief, in whatever order you do it, you will reach acceptance and experience the life-giving effects of the process. Remember, the only way of your grief is through it. Accept that you will experience a bout of anger, sorrow, fear, etc. as you grieve over the painful loss. Give yourself the time to grieve. There is no need to move on with your life so fast. Everyone's ways of coping is different. Talk to trusted friend. Keep a journal and note down your emotions and be kind to yourself. Besides grieving, another common emotion experienced during the time of a painful loss is a sense of insecurity that comes from the lack of trust. Trust in self, others, or even in God. Self-trust is an important quality and even more critical when we face loss, loneliness, and rejection. When we trust ourselves, we are in touch with the inner one, inner core of us, our long-held belief as well as value. When we are knocked down off our balance because of a loss, we may change our behavior, our value, or our way of being. We lose faith in ourselves. If we have disappointment, abandonment, rejection, trusting another person is extremely difficult because of our personal histories and the lifetime of experience. Each one of us has a unique attributes to draw upon of our own personal wisdom. Although we have been wounded, those inner resources are still within us. We need to behave in, we need to believe in the existence. We need to trust ourselves. Now is the time to discover your strength. You have inner resources to make the decision to be happy or unhappy. As social beings, we need trusting relationships, friendship, both men and women. There are many levels of relationship and friendship, from acquaintance to trusted friend, and they take time to develop. Trust is necessary for successful relationship, and this is a vital component of a successful relationship between men and women. We also need to restore our relationship with God. It is important to remember those times that God was there for us, and He was the one who sees us through in the lowest seasons of our life. God is always there, but we may not always feel His presence because we could be too caught up with our own interpretation of the event that's happening. Now, I want to explain there are two types of guilt. When we experience profound loss and we are hurting deeply, we often relate to others from our pain, out of anger and depression. And we may punish ourselves or others, right, with just destructive behavior, all of which create guilt. And there are two kinds of guilt, realistic and unrealistic. They both feel the same, but it is important to understand the difference. Realistic guilt is when I know I have done something wrong and I'm responsible basically for the act and to hurt someone and basically and impact our relationship. Perhaps I failed to communicate or care, right? Quarrel with others, or were rude and critical, unforgiving. Facing up with these behaviors and attitude, taking responsible for them, seeking forgiveness, free us from this in life. But imagined wrong is unrealistic guilt. We can overwhelm ourselves. We may feel guilty, remorseful over things we have done and failed to do, in which we have no control, and which we have good intention, but we are sincerely unknowing of the result. We may berate others with thoughts of, we may berate ourselves with thoughts of basically, what if only, continually blaming ourselves and engaging in other forms of self-punishment, blaming ourselves for passing of a loved one or the abandonment of an ex-spouse. This is unrealistic guilt. So forgiveness is giving, is for giving, and so is receiving of life. So now we have Carol, who will share her life story.
Thank you, Joseph. Good morning, everyone. I'm Carol, and I'm very privileged today to be here to share my story of a new beginning with you. It's a story of a journey from darkness to light, sadness to joy, and most importantly, of God's agape love and mercy. My story consists of a few sections, and I will use the initial W to name my ex-spouse. Sweet start. I come from a Catholic family with loving parents, an older sister, and a younger brother. My papa was a loving and committed husband. Actually, he passed on this year in May, and I'm very sure he's in heaven now. Living with such a doting and caring father, I always envisioned myself marrying a man just like him. W and I met at a party when we were 15, and we started to date seriously when we were 21. After a year and a half, W went to pursue his university studies overseas while I waited faithfully for him for 4 years to be together in Singapore. Of course, during the initial years of courtship and marriage, I felt loved by W and was so happy that I could be with the man of my dreams. Moreover, when our firstborn, a son, came to the world, we were over the moon, feeling so blessed. For me, I was contented as my family life was moving along in the right direction. Turn of events. However, W and I started to quarrel more often over matters big and small. Along the way, I became suspicious of his behavior as signs of infidelity surfaced, though he was quick to deny them. I became more disappointed and frustrated with him as he became someone I could no longer trust. To worsen things, he started to mismanage his finances and got himself into credit card debts. The contented life which I was enjoying was turning into a nightmare. What did I do to deserve this cross? I often questioned myself. I felt enslaved as my whole life revolved around him, wondering who he was with, where was he, and what was he up to. I felt very insecure. Life with W was like a roller coaster ride. Of course, there were good times and bad days. Good days was when 2 more kids came along, our daughter and a younger son. Children are indeed a blessing. Then someone recommended that we attend Retroval to salvage our marriage. After Retroval, I felt we were on the mend and that there was hope and a second chance for our future together. However, a few months later, a bomb dropped on me, and I received an anonymous message on my mobile with the words, "He's cheating on you." Spiritual warfare. I received the message on the first day of primary school for my eldest son. I was devastated, of course, as I felt my whole world just crashed. I confronted him, W, but he assured me that it was untrue. As I shared with a close Christian colleague the cheating message, she immediately exclaimed that it was spiritual warfare on my marriage. The next day, my son took out a book with a picture of St. Michael. He was actually studying at St. Michael's School then. The archangel, as he recognized the picture on the book from the statue of St. Michael, which he saw in school. Lo and behold, the title of the book was Spiritual Warfare. With this coincidence, I brought this book to Novena Church, and when I read the points about spiritual warfare, silent treatment and bitterness were all part of this warfare. That moment, I realized I have wronged W when I retaliated with silent treatment and bitterness. I realized that although adultery is a sin, cooperating with the evil one with resentment for the pain I'm suffering was sinful too. In order to conquer spiritual warfare, I learned that I have to put in love. With this awareness, I wanted to change my attitude towards W. I decided to put more effort into the marriage and shower him with unconditional love and patience. However, delivered the ultimate shocking news. He informed me that he had intentions to leave the family for another woman. Though I begged him to stay for the sake of the family, he was adamant on leaving. I was heartbroken that he was willing to let go of me and the children. The future looked bleak, and I did not know what lied ahead of us. A ray of hope. After the painful separation, I braced myself and continued with my life with the children. My desire was for them to develop into happy and well-balanced kids. To overcome my misery and pain, I started attending retreats, healing masses, and talks. I became more active in church and found fulfillment and purpose in serving others. One of my colleagues encouraged me to attend the beginning experience, BE weekend, as she shared how she has benefited from the program. Thanks, Sue. I was open to the idea and signed up for the weekend. It has been 10 years since then. I remembered being very excited, and I was looking forward to the weekend. During the weekend, I met the other participants who were also suffering from the loss of a love relationship through death, divorce, or separation. The well-designed program helped me focus on my experience and allowed me to see the hope of a new beginning without W. There was a useful talk on guilt, as Joseph has shared, and I learned that there are two types of guilt, realistic and unrealistic. I realized I harbored feelings of guilt, feeling of shame, because as I know that we are not allowed to divorce as Catholics. However, it came to light during that weekend that it was an unrealistic guilt on my part, as it was not within my control to stop W from leaving. I had done my part to make him stay, but he insisted on doing that. The weekend showed me how I could transform the pain of loss into experience of growth. I made some tremendous friends through bonding activities and gatherings during special occasions. I felt I was not alone in this journey. Today, I'm in a good place. I feel peace in my heart, which was the one thing I prayed for since the start of my marital problems. Divorce was never something I wanted. However, through this experience, I'm liberated and discovered my true self. I read this reflection during a recent spiritual retreat. When we are truly ourselves, God shines through us in the most glorious and unique way. However, the path must go through the cross. The cross I'd carried has indeed become a crown of blessing. Although W and I are divorced, we still meet as a family for meals and even holidays. W and I are now friends as I harbor no bitterness towards him. Just to share, overcoming the spiritual warfare, this is a photo of the book that, it was really the book in 2005, spiritual warfare book that my son handed to me, which really changed the way I think about the whole situation. And then a family holiday in Orlando in 2016, 11 years after he left. And this picture was the affirmation from God, in the Orlando trip. After Mass one Sunday, I saw this bag, the wings, and I was just walking through it, and when I turned and I saw, wow, it's Saint Michael, the archangel, and it says, draw strength from the Lord. So I really felt God's, loving hand guiding me through the journey from darkness to light. And I was so heartened and very grateful. So, as I shared, God works in mysterious ways during this trip. So we met St. Michael again, definitely touched by an angel. So it just reminded me of God's protection and unconditional love, as I shared, for me and my family through this special angel, all through these years. He has walked with me, provided me with a good and strong support system, my faith, my family, and my friends. I was awed by this affirmation. And someone actually wrote to me during my most darkest time, Psalm 138 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, Those whose spirit is crushed, he will save. Definitely he has saved me. And the 7-year-old son who handed me the spiritual warfare book is now 23 years old, and I'm very happy that he's here to support me, sitting in the back row. Thanks, Tim. He's now in NUS, and also my daughter next to him. Yeah, so God really fulfilled his promises. So the summary of Thanksgiving. Today, I'm very thankful for the gift of my Catholic faith and the support that the church provides in the formation of its congregation. As shared, I've gained so much from the BE ministry in my healing journey. I'm grateful that our ministry has a compassionate and committed spiritual director in Father Eugene Vaz and a supportive BE community. Thanks to all the brothers and sisters here for your support. My hope is for the BE ministry to continue to flourish in its beautiful mission to help any grieving participant experience a new beginning and to know that you never walk alone. Thank you.
Now it's my turn to share. Okay. The background, my wife, which you can see from the picture, right? She was my favorite customer when I was an engineer. And I was captivated by her beauty, right? Also struck by her caring nature. And we had the most wonderful courtship and decided to get married. And I was most proud to have my firstborn, James, and it was assigned overseas. And Jackie sacrificed her job just to be with me in the United States. We had a wonderful time. Later, we came back, and I have a younger son, John. We felt so blessed to have a normal, happy family. But then, things take a change, right? Suddenly, Jackie was having severe diarrhea for a week and bleeding from the bottom. When we went to check, we were stunned. She had a tumor in the rectum. And after the operation, even worse news, more shocking news, she has third-stage cancer. Now, thoughts of losing my wife terrified me and made me numb. I was in denial. I was scared and fear losing her. This can't be happening. I must be in a nightmare. I couldn't imagine a life without Jackie, whom I deeply love. Now, next stage of grief was anger. I made a decision to stop work and be with Jackie, to comfort her and support her through the dreadful period. Despite my anger with God, how could God do this to us? Right. I still prayed very hard though. And then I started to bargain with God, right? I started to bargain for her life. I was willing to give up anything to get her health back. I was in the bargaining stage of grief. I was desperate. I worked frantically, read books, exploring the internet, right? I attended seminars and healing services. I felt I need to understand all there is to know about cancer. And there must be a way out of this. I felt I need to find a cure for her. I prayed and prayed, begging for God to help find a way to cure her. The journey was very jagged. My feelings swung back and forth. I was afraid of not knowing what was to come. When Jackie had chemotherapy, she was in tremendous pain. My heart ached for her. I cried to God and plead again and again to perform a miracle to cure her. I even asked God if I can stand in her place. As a way to comfort her, I even took bitter Chinese herbs together with her. Then there was a flicker of hope because Jackie gained her appetite after coming back from a healing service. She had a miracle, and we were overcome with joy, and we celebrate and give thanks to God. I had the opportunity to accompany her to do her bucket list, traveling to a vacation to Beijing and so on. I was so happy, right? Everything seems to be back to normal. Then suddenly, she had a relapse. I began bargaining again for her life, but this time Jackie did not recover. She died. I was shattered. My heart sank. The pain of my loss was so unbearable. I buried myself with work. I was in depression. I was spiritually dead because I have no time to think. It was just too painful to think. I shrink back to denial. I was in depression and yet I was in denial. I pretended that my wife was still around, keeping all her things as they were. And my colleague commented that I was working too hard. I was like a robot. I had no feeling. In reality, I dare not feel. It was just too painful. At one time, I was so sick. I made many mistakes at work, and not only my health suffered, but my work suffered too. Depression set in. I finally realized that I was challenging God. I was trying to help others to heal and fight sickness and cancer. And yet, I'm allowing myself to waste away. It was just crazy. I was the one who needed healing. I finally dawned on me that it did not work. I must work through this grief. And otherwise I'll be just a robot. No feeling, spiritually dead. So I needed to work through the grief, and thank God someone recommended me to begin an experience, right? And the first step is to come out of myself, start to basically involve, and through BE, I worked through my griefs and accepted my wife's death. I do feel empty and lonely sometimes, but these were moments that I felt like dying so that I could be with my wife in heaven. However, to rid myself of any symptoms of spiritual death, I realized that I need to surrender myself to God as His instrument and feel God's healing love. I finally accept and surrendered my wife to God, that I can truly be His instrument, and I praise and thanks God for His healing. Now, coping with grief, I serve as a cancer support. And my greatest healing is when I was praying. So know that we can be wounded healers, right? When we are willing to be an instrument of God. And when I went to visit my goddaughter's mother, who had cancer in the hospital, and allowing myself to be his instrument of love, holding her hand, asking God to channel God's healing love to her, miracles happen. As God poured down his love into me, I was the one that needed love. I was an empty tank. There was no love that can come out from me unless God filled my tank with love and overflow from me to her. I was restored. So learning to trust again. When I was in depression and praying for death, to be with my wife, right? I neglect taking care of my health till I was in tremendous pain and having very mixed feeling. On one hand, trying to thank God that he's going to take me home. On the other hand, don't like the pain. Then God speak to me. And he says, Joe, how does a loving father feel looking at you? Are you pulling me down to hell, thinking you're going to heaven? I was shocked. I don't want to go to hell. Then he allowed my wife to speak to me in the same tonality. Joe, you believe I'm in heaven, right? I answered, yes. What's the definition of heaven? Eternal joy. But can I be happy as your wife, seeing you suffer like this? Are you pulling me down to hell thinking you go to heaven? Oh no. Immediately I get up, kneel down, and I cried and I cried. And I cried to God and says, God, forgive me. I'm a disobedient child. You have the sovereign right to bring my wife to heaven at the right moment in time. And you have a sovereign right to give me life. Why am I such a disobedient child to reject your life? Forgive me. And I remember the scene that Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he prayed, Father, not my will be done. Let your will be done. Now, I also go through two kinds of guilt, realistic and unrealistic guilt. Realistic guilt is being guilty for something I have done wrong, and I'm in control of it. That I've basically, and while unrealistic guilt is something that I blame myself, right? And it is through beginning experience I realized I was blaming myself for asking my wife to go through chemo. And when she suffered and then finally died, I blame myself for it. But through beginning experience, I realized that what was my intention? My intention, was it to kill her? No, it's to heal her. It's just that I did not know the consequences of the chemo, right? So it is through that meditation process that I realized I could set myself free of the unrealistic guilt. So now we have Father who will give us a talk.
Good morning, dear friends. Grief is the emotional, physical, and spiritual pain we feel when we experience loss. We all experience grief at some time in our life. We might grieve for numerous reasons, because we are separated from whom we love, because we fear the unknown, because we are anxious about the future, because we feel guilty, because we think we have to grieve, because we miss a loved one, and so on. Grief can be extremely crushing. We need a point of reference to frame our grief. And that point of reference is the Word of God. The truth is, dear friends, we live in a world created and morally good, but a world that is affected by sin. And this causes pain through death and through loss of a relationship which God never intended, but is the consequence of sin. But in this state of brokenness, God has not forsaken His creation. He is offering us a master plan of redemption through His Son, Jesus. Losing someone we love hurts. Grief often takes over and begins to choke the life out of our soul. Even Jesus experienced the gamut of emotions that comes from losing a friend or a relative. He lost his good friend Lazarus, and the Bible tells us he just wept. He lost his cousin John the Baptist, who went through a terrible death, being beheaded, and Jesus was so sad. He was so broken-hearted. We see in Matthew chapter 14, verse 13, that on hearing the death of John the Baptist, Jesus just wanted to get away. he got into a boat to go to a desolate place on the other side of the lake. And when he reaches the other side of the lake, he sees a crowd there waiting to welcome him. So you can just imagine how Jesus must have felt. He wanted to be alone. He wanted to grieve. He wanted to have some time with God, his Father, in prayer and discernment and reflection. And here was this crowd. How would you feel, dear friends, if you were in such a situation as Jesus? How would you look at this crowd and how will you feel? Jesus sees the crowds and has compassion on them and immediately sets out to reach out to heal their sick. Although he is grieving the loss of his cousin, John the Baptist, Jesus reaches out to those needy in the crowd. Beginning experience is a peer grief ministry for separated, divorced, and widowed adults who are trying to find a new beginning. The loss of a loved one through separation, divorce, or death is one of life's most traumatic experiences. It can result in nearly unbearable feelings of loneliness and grief. Many people who have suffered this loss feel left out by the church. They feel uneasy around married friends. They feel unsure of themselves. They even feel uncertain about their future. They seek help to put the past in perspective and get their lives going along a new path, a path that will bring them back to themselves, their family, and God. Beginning experience is a process which helps grieving persons to see their own self-worth. What does Jesus tell us about how to handle grief? He tells us that we must use our grief for ministry. We must be very careful that our mourning and our grieving does not turn our sorrow into self-pity. Our sorrow must empower us to love and to serve, just as Jesus did. And this is what beginning experience tries to put into effect. Thank you. God bless.
So, beginning experience is a peer ministry, and I'm very thankful for those ministry members that are here. It's because of them I'm healed, right? If not, I will still be in spiritual death. You know, you see a zombie walking around. Yeah, they can't. So, and like Father says, we are here to pay forward. And after I've been healed, I can't pay them back because they are no longer in grief, right? Right. So the only thing is to pay for and reach out to others, right? So spread the news. All of us have known someone who lost a loved one, right? So do visit us if you have questions. We can't answer questions here, but I guess we do have a booth, right? So come and visit us at the Catholic Welfare Center, right? Canada, right? So at level 2, that kind of situation. So see us there because we have to stop sharp for the next group, right? So thank you. Right.